Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program Islam Explained. We are joined by Omer A Ergi. Welcome again, Omer.
Thank you, Aisha.
It's a pleasure having you. Now, I've invited him specifically for this topic as it is his area of expertise. Now, Omer is a theologian and a lecturer at Charles Sturt University. Now, he's authored 6 books and also co-authored more than 10 books. Now, Omer, it has come to my attention that there are a few high-profile Muslims out there who are encouraging Muslims to accept the theory of evolution, claiming that it is a scientific theory and there are considerable amounts of evidence to support it. Now, some even claim that it is as real as gravity, and we should not be saying that it is just a theory. Now, how would you respond to this claim?
Well, it's a good question, Vaisal, and it is a very sensitive topic, this. So I have brought some notes as well here.
Sure.
Let me say this first, Vaisal. I agree with only one part of this claim. Yes, it is a scientific theory. There's no doubt about that. Evolution is a scientific theory. But we need to define what a scientific theory is as well. A scientific theory is an attempt to explain specific natural phenomena. So it is not guesswork. It could be based on, for example, observation, gathered evidence, and or experimentation as well. However, it is also important to note that scientific theories can indeed be challenged. By what? With scientific evidence or argument. Therefore, I disagree really with the claim that Muslims should just accept it, because this is not a matter of faith. It's to do with science. And I also disagree with the analogy about gravity, because as gravity is something we can measure, we can calculate, we can formulate, and we can even experience it. For example, Isaac Newton has an equation for it as well. F equals gravitational constant, mass 1, mass 2, divided by radius squared. Can you show me, for example, one person on Earth who would actually deny gravity?
Yeah.
So I don't think it should be compared with gravity.
Yeah, I understand, yes, but there is an academic that I've noted here. He claims that it is unscientific or unacademic to deny the theory of evolution. How would you respond to this?
Well, I'm going to disagree with this claim also, simply because there are many scientists currently in this contemporary world and academics in the disciplines, for example, of molecular biology, biochemistry, philosophy, who challenge some key concepts and premises of the Darwinian theory of evolution. And they do this, they put forward their repudiations or refutations and challenges not on religious or faith grounds. They do it on scientific grounds with evidence and with valid philosophical arguments. So we cannot claim that these scientists and academics are unacademic or unscientific. Yeah.
So what aspects or key concepts of theory do they challenge?
Well, let me clarify this first, because as I said, the theory of evolution is like a huge bag. It contains many sub-theories in it as well. For example, mutations, adaptations, natural selection, microevolution, macroevolution, intraspecies evolution, interspecies evolution, slight variations, for example, in the gene pool carried through generations, speciation, very interesting. Like, for example, the example they use of Galapagos finches that have adapted their beaks, and so on. So now let me say this very clearly. No one is really challenging the fact that mutations occur in nature. And no one is challenging adaptations. We see it, we observe it. This is a scientific fact. No one is challenging the fact that there is process of selection in nature. No one is denying this also. And also no one is refuting or rejecting that, for example, microbiological organisms like the bacteria becoming resistant either through genetic change that helps it survive, or by getting DNA from bacteria, other bacteria that is already resistant. We're not denying any of these things. So bacteria can mutate, can adapt as well. We know all this. These are all scientific facts. What is really challenged here is this. what is the mechanics used here? Is the process just random or is it controlled? Let me give you one example, Waisa. The evolution of embryo, let us say, the development of embryo in the mother's womb. Let us think about the process. The sperm fuses with the ovum first. The result is the production of fertilized egg, isn't it? And then the dividing and multiplying begins within 24 hours. And then the egg divides into 4, 2, 4, 8, 16, and so on. Then we actually see it transform into fetus. And then eventually a fully developed human being, isn't it? We observe this. We can observe this with our technology today. And interestingly, the Holy Quran clearly mentions this. The verse says, He creates you in the wombs of your mothers, stage after stage, creation after creation, within the veils of three darkness. It's very interesting. And those three darkness refers to the three layers that protect the baby in the mother's womb. We can actually observe all of the stages of the development, or you can use the term evolution, with our own eyes. Our technology allows us to do this. But here's the million-dollar question. Is this amazing biological process occurring randomly, or is it all programmed and controlled? This is the million-dollar question. As soon as that sperm unites with the ovum, there is an objective there. There is a direction. There is an aim to produce a fully developed human being. This amazing process cannot be explained through the mechanics that work only by using randomness. So we can say that there is a perfectly working biological system there. And this system always follows certain rules of biochemistry and molecular biology. Now we can take this example analogy and apply it to natural selection, for example, or favorable adaptation. Do they have a direction? Does natural selection has a direction? Does it have an objective to produce a certain product, an end product? Yes, indeed, isn't it? So maybe I can use one example about the development or evolution of the eye. Now imagine the evolution of the eye from a simple light detection found on some bacteria to a patch of photoreceptors and to magnificently complex image-forming biological machinery that we see today, like the human eye. So these scientists who challenge some of the key concepts of evolution, look, I'm not saying the entire evolution theory, some of the key concepts, their argument is this, that this process we observe could not have gradually evolved. The evolution, gradual evolution, is not plausible for us. That's what they're saying. And therefore, we believe that this is a product of design. And let me clarify this again. No one is denying scientific facts such as adaptation. We know that they occur in nature. Mutations, selection in nature. Although, I personally don't call it natural selection. I call it divine selection because there is a certain process there. So the argument really here is not about denying whether this theory occurs in nature. It's about what is the mechanism used here. That's what the real argument is. Yeah.
So basically you're not challenging concepts like adaptation or mutation. So does this mean you're also accepting macroevolution? Or let me put it clearly, the argument that all species come from a common ancestor. The reason why I ask this is one academic actually says we can't as Muslims accept that all species except humans come from a common ancestor and claim that the entire process was willed by God.
So is the claim that Muslims can accept that all species come from a common ancestor?
So they should accept that they come from a common ancestor.
Except for
except for humans.
Okay, this is the claim. Well, in my view, to be honest, this claim is more illogical than accepting or rejecting the entire theory. Simply because there are philosophical inconsistencies here, or theological. But let me respond to this from a theological perspective, being a theologian, arguing that since Homo sapiens, humans, have only been around about 60 to 70,000 years, and therefore they were a unique creation of God, but this would keep us loyal to the Quran, of course, the Quranic narrative. But the rest of the, for example, 8 million different species on Earth has a common ancestor, has serious philosophical inconsistencies. Why? Because we would be saying that God created human beings uniquely, but with the rest of the species on Earth, he was just experimenting to see what would be the end product. As the evolutionary process relies on random mutations, adaptations, and natural selection. So, from a theological perspective, this would be illogical for us. If, on the other hand, the claim is this, okay, the entire process was programmed and controlled by God, the evolutionary process, and therefore he knew exactly what the end product will be, then there would be another inconsistency, because you would have to accept that the process wasn't random.
That's right.
It's all programmed. So in regards to macroevolution, I personally do not find very verifiable evidence in particular for interspecies evolution, because we can see some species adapting to the environmental changes around them within the one population, but we don't really see clear evidence of species evolving into completely different species, which we call interspecies evolution. Now, there are examples of we can say adaptation within the species itself. Like one famous example that the evolutionists use quite commonly is the English peppered moth, which was observed to change color in particular during the Industrial Revolution, and which the moth became darker in color. Later, when the pollution was reduced, light-colored moths became more dominant. They saw this change. But this is a change or adaptation within the species, within one population itself. And I disagree with this anyway. It is a scientific fact that in order to survive, species can indeed adapt to the environmental changes, but this adaptation is limited by the species' genetic structure. For example, a species do not evolve into completely different species so that it can adapt. So when you hit that barrier of fatality, you cannot, surpass that barrier. The fatality will occur within the species. It will not evolve anymore and become a different species. So there is no evidence of this interspecies evolution that I'm talking about. One very popular example that I use, even with gradual evolution, that is the evolution of the bats. Where there is an argument that bats had an eye that could see in the past, but remaining in dark caves for such a long periods of time, bats lost their eyesight. But in order to survive, selection and everything, in order to survive, they had to adapt to the conditions in their environment, and gradually they developed or evolved this system, magnificent system that we call echolocation. They could actually see through their hearing, emitting sound which bounces off the nearby objects and returns to them. They can navigate themselves through very tight spaces as well. But my argument is, against this is this, and it's a refutation, philosophical refutation. If bats originally had eyes that could see, why did they on Earth? Why they say why the hell on Earth?
Yeah.
They insisted on living in dark caves. where they could have easily flown out of the cave, you know, during daylight, you know, found their, you know, sustenance, you know, seek their sustenance. They could have easily done that. And interestingly, did all the bats all over the world, you know, remained in caves, and eventually lost their eyes. So there are some inconsistencies in regards to macroevolution, in particular about interspecies evolution. But as I said before, you know, we don't deny adaptation. You know, we don't deny that there is a food chain in nature. We don't deny that there are mutations, you know, in particular in a microbiological level. But as I said, even bacteria, when it mutates and adapts, bacteria does not, you know, evolve into another species, another creature. It's still a bacteria. So the only evidence I can say that for interspecies evolution is fossil records and DNA comparisons. That's what it is. Resembling, for example, the bone structure of an extinct species to some other species or species that exist today, and claiming that this must be the ancestor of this particular species. For me, this is only speculative science. I personally believe that every species has an Adam. Every species has an Adam. And again, I should make this clear, scientific theories should be validated or challenged only through science. So people should not belittle or criticize those who challenge certain premises or certain key concepts of the evolution theory by providing scientific arguments. So the challenge is not done through religious or theological arguments. The challenge is done through scientific arguments, and this should be acceptable. Scientists should be open to criticism. You know, if there's a valid argument, they can accept. If not, they can reject.
That's right.
So, for example, there's one argument like that, such as the intelligent design argument. You know, why not listen to it? Have a look at it. It could be valid. Do you know what I mean?
That's right.
So this is my whole view in that we should not sort of, you know, impose people to accept this or reject this. Let science handle this. You know, either, you know, prove it or disprove it.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I thank you, Omer, for explaining this difficult topic. And so we could basically conclude that the theory of evolution either should it's basically a scientific theory, and it should be either refuted or supported through scientific grounds, basically.
Yes, I agree.
So, again, thank you for joining us and explaining this topic. And I'd like to thank our viewers for joining in, and we'll see you next time.